Welcome to another episode of Meer Speaks. I am your host, Lorde, founder of SEY and entrepreneur, military veteran. Shout out to Brooklyn. Go Knicks. So today we're gonna talk about why people stay stuck. I think it affects way more people than, a lot of people are willing to admit. Being stuck, not financially stuck, not physically stuck. We're talking about mentally stuck, emotionally stuck, and spiritually stuck. The kind of stuck where every year starts to feel like the year before and it sounds the same. You know that when it's like, oh no, this year is going to be different. This year is going to be my year. And then this year it turns out to be the same thing like you were doing before. So it's the same goals, same conversations, and it's the same excuses. A different calendar. And the crazy part, most people know exactly what they need to do. So the question is, why aren't they doing it? So now, before you get defensive, I've been there too. Trust me. I've definitely had a lot of periods in my life where, I can admit, excuse me, that I was really in my own way. You know, I had seasons where I knew the move, I knew the answer, and I knew what needed to happen, and still sat there overthinking everything that I needed to do. And overthinking will have you in a space where you're just not executing because you're overthinking everything. Now you're second guessing yourself. And then when you overthink, you start to feed into doubt. And once you start feeding into doubt, everything I feel goes downhill. So, this isn't just me just talking to anybody. This is a conversation because I think a lot of people aren't stuck because life is holding them back. I think they're stuck because they're holding themselves back. So let's talk about it. So being stuck is actually a decision problem. I know a lot of people think, oh, I got so many things going on. No, it's a decision problem. These are choices that we are making. One thing I notice is people love information, and we're living in a day and age where there's so much technology, there's so much information. It's almost like an overload of information. Is You're overwhelmed with so much information. It's kind of like, okay, so at this point, where do I start? Everybody loves podcasts, they love YouTube videos, they love books, they love courses, but information really isn't the problem anymore. Because, like I said, we have so much information at this point. You can't even say, "Well, I don't know this." You can literally go on your phone, on your computer, and find everything that you need. So most people already know enough to improve their lives. They know they need to exercise. They know they need to save money. They know they need to start their business. They know they need to leave that relationship. They know they need to stop procrastinating. Now the question is, why aren't you? So the issue clearly isn't the knowledge, it's the decision. So we have to start making better decisions. At some point, you have to stop needing another answer. You need courage. Because every breakthrough starts with a decision that feels uncomfortable. You know, there was plenty times, unfortunately, where I was homeless and, you know, that was such an uncomfortable situation for me, having to ask other people for help. And I'm really not that type of person to ask people for help. And it wasn't until I was, down, where I got to the point. It wasn't until I was down, where I was just like, you know what, I really got to do something better with my life. I have to start making certain changes. So quick little story, like when I was in COVID, so I worked in a restaurant as a chef. FYI, I have a whole culinary degree, and I was really just ready to quit my job. And my best friend at the time, Keena, she was like, "Nah, just wait a little bit." She said, "I don't know, something's just telling me you just should wait." Because I've always been a person like, I don't want to work for somebody. I want to live life on my own terms. And sorry, Planet Fitness over here messaging me. And I want to live life on my own terms, but I also want to change the world. But I also knew, even doing music and things like that, those kind of things, they don't automatically put money in your pocket. Those are one of those things you kind of got to be resilient. And long story short, COVID ended up happening. And it was a blessing in disguise because honestly, I got furloughed from my job because the restaurant said, well, it's COVID. You gonna have we letting everybody go, and if we bring you back, we bring you back. So it was just at that point of okay, well, now you have no choice but to be in the house. So what are you gonna do? And it's like okay, so now low key, I'm kind of forced to live how I wanted to live, but not on the timing I chose. But it was okay because I was literally just like, I'm ready to quit my job. I'm ready to quit my job. And that's when I fully went in with Shamir Empowers You. So it's so much stuff I was trying to figure out. At that time, I had started an audio podcast through, what's that platform? It's something with a, I know it's not Audible. It's another podcast Anchor. So I had started with Anchor, and I was just doing audio. I got some good views on Anchor, but I was really just lost in no direction. But I was happy that I was actually starting to do the things. So I started SCY when I didn't figure it out, and here we are now today, to the point of now I have my first event coming in August. So if you're in Atlanta, make sure you come out and show some love. The tickets will be online soon. So we get comfortable in our frustration. The one thing that hit me hard when I realized it is some people hate their situation, but they lived in it so long that it becomes familiar. Sometimes you could be so comfortable with dysfunction to the point that it becomes normal. So once that dysfunction becomes normal, even living a better way of life just seems real weird to you. And familiar seems safe even when it hurts, right? Think about that. Think about people who are complaining about the same thing over and over, for the past couple years, like, oh, I'm tired of this, I'm tired of that. But really, what are they doing to change it? Because it's not that they can't change it, because change requires discomfort. There's so many people out here just sleeping on their potential, but they refuse to be uncomfortable to get the life that they want. Sometimes we stay in situations we hate because we learn how to survive. And we got to get to that point of not surviving anymore. We want to thrive. We want to live. We don't want to just exist anymore. I think that's really what really pushed me to go to freelance, because even after, so I was in the military. After I got out, I got my culinary degree, worked in restaurants, COVID happened. And then, like I said, I do music. So part of me was like, I always wanted to own my own label, but I always was like, you know what? If I'm going to own my own label, I need to know certain things. I also, because I used to mix my own records because I did go to audio school. Was it before? No, I think the audio school was after the military, but I didn't finish in New York because I had an attendance issue. My grades was great, but my attendance was not. So anyway, during COVID, I decided, okay, I want to go to Full Sail. My wife was like, well, try and get those transcripts, and I could not get those transcripts, and I really was about to give up. And my wife was like, just try this such and such, and give it a shot. And long story short, got my transcripts. I ended up going to Full Sail. I got my bachelor's in recording arts. So anyway, after that, I ended up getting a job working at this company called Encore. Not the move, but I ended up doing that because I ended up crashing my car. So we was in Kansas with my wife's family, and I ended up crashing my car, and then I worked out there. But the goal was always to come to Georgia, because I don't know why, as as a kid from Brooklyn, I always, something in me was like, this is where you need to be. This is where you need to be. And here I am now, in Georgia, and I ended up transferring that job out here. And then a situation ended up happening where my homeboy was like, yo, I could put you on a freelance gig. So I ended up doing it. And then I had a conversation with my boss like, hey, well, I had to do what I had to do because you're not really paying me and you're not giving me consistent hours. And I have to take care of my family. My family comes first. And I was going to put in my 2 weeks anyway, if I'm being completely honest. And he was just being a dick about it, honestly. So I was like, well, here's your 2 weeks notice early. Goodbye, peace. And I ended up starting freelancing. and I never looked back. I haven't had a job in about I think two years now, 2 3 years. So been freelancing, doing audio visuals, setting up events, and it's about to be my last year doing that. But we have to think about the destination. Where are we trying to go? And we really got to stay focused. So we talked about overthinking, right? So overthinking feels productive because a lot of times people get caught in the planning stage and it's like, well, I'm working on it, I'm working on it. But at some point, how long are you going to be working on it, right? Overthinking can feel like real work, but it's not. You convince yourself that you're making progress because you're analyzing everything, researching everything, planning everything, talking about everything. Meanwhile, nothing is moving. So if nothing is moving, what are you really doing? I've learned that clarity doesn't always come before action. Sometimes, a lot of time, honestly, clarity comes from action. You start, you learn, you adjust, you keep moving progress, and that's really how progress works. But people actually don't want to do the work, so most people are waiting until they're 100% ready, and that day never comes because you're never going to be 100% ready. You always want to prepare yourself for when the opportunity arrives, but you can't prepare yourself to the point of you never even getting out there, right? Because if you never get out there, then the opportunity won't arise because you're too busy planning, you're too busy preparing. So, what is the cost of staying stuck? What is the cost of staying where you are in this current situation? Most people always talk about the risk of trying, but nobody talks about the risk of staying the same. If you stay in the same place that you are, I talked about it on a webinar I did called New Year, New You. And it was basically, every year we talk about the goals that we want to accomplish. Every year we talk about, okay, I'm going to do this. I'm going to be that. Okay, this year I'm going to lose weight. This year I'm going to start my business. This year I'm going to travel more. This year I'm going to get more residual income. Whatever it is we say to ourselves, and then it just ends up being the same thing over and over. And what is it costing you to stay stuck? What is it costing you to stay right where you are at this current moment? What is it costing your future? What is it costing your family? What is it costing your peace? And to me, to be honest, your peace is the most important thing you can have. I will cut off people. I will cut off everything just to make sure my peace is intact. You have to really think about it because every year that you delay something that you're supposed to do, a little piece of your self trust disappears. And once that keeps disappearing, the less and less that you're gonna actually be doing. And when you stop trusting yourself to follow through, every goal starts to feel heavy to the point where you don't even know what you're supposed to be doing. You know what you want to be doing, but you don't know what you're supposed to be doing. You don't want to miss opportunities because of fear. You don't want to let those things hold you back and then be talking about in the next couple of years, well, I shoulda or well, I coulda. Yeah, you coulda did a lot of things, but you didn't. So how do we break the pattern? How do we stop, just staying stuck in a sense? So I'm gonna give you something simple. Stop trying to change your whole entire life in 1 week. What I'm realizing is definitely for real, a day by day, and you have to make a move. One, just one move. Stop trying to do multiple things. There's people who can do multiple things, but when you're in a place where you're already stuck, you need to focus on one thing. Make that one phone call, that one application, that one workout, that one video, and the one turns into many, that one conversation, that one decision. Momentum doesn't come from thinking, it comes from doing, it comes from movement. And momentum comes from movement, and movement creates confidence. And the more evidence you give yourself that you can follow through, the more unstoppable you become. Once I really started to see that I didn't need a job to live, it was like, okay, so now I don't have to be in survival mode anymore. I can really go out here and get it. And I think that's the best thing when I'm living life to the point of I wake up every day, I decide what I want to do. I just did a 3 week coaching a couple weeks back, and It was such a pleasure. I was nervous, of course, because helping people is no small thing. And when you're really helping somebody change their life, that's, I don't want to say a lot of pressure, but it is a lot of pressure. One thing I learned throughout life, especially in the military, is even living and growing up in Brooklyn to a single mom. My mom is Caribbean. That nobody's coming to save you. If you want to rescue, you got to come rescue yourself, not your friends, not your family, not some magical opportunity. There were seasons I had to look in the mirror and admit that I was the issue. I was the problem holding me back, not my circumstances, me. And that wasn't easy at all. And once I realized I was the reason I was where I was or where I wasn't, then I was like, okay, so if I'm the reason where I am, I have the power to change it. And once you realize that you actually have that power, oh, everything in your life changes. Because if I'm the problem, oh, I'm the solution. Okay, so say less. Like I told you, being homeless multiple times, being in the military, it showed me anything you want to do is possible. You just have to make sure that you are doing the things. You just have to take the step. You just have to make the decision, that one leap, and that's on you to do. So maybe you're not stuck. Maybe you're just standing still. There's a difference. And if that's true, that's a good move because you can move today, not next month, not next year, today. And if you're listening to this and you're trying to figure everything out alone, coaching might be your next step. So check the link on this video and let's talk. So, one thing I want you to reflect on before we close is, what's one decision you've been avoiding that could change the direction of your whole life? And I feel like you already know the answer. So, my name is Shamir. This is Meer Speaks. And remember, I'm but a ripple in the pond. So are you. Go out there and touch somebody. Peace.